Chapter 8 The Wizard Story, Part 2 41. Dedlin would not say another word until he had drunk not one but 2 flasks of ale, and held another full flask tight in his fist, rousing up everyone's impatient interest in what all had happened. And then did he talk. Everything I said was true, except for the Tital Van Tu episode, he finally began. I did not change him into an aardvark, whatever an aardvark might be. He was doing well enough when I saw him last, although there were dark deeds astir. But I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'll back up to the events of the night we investigated the wreck of the Tigre. I was nearly eaten alive by the black wolferines of hell. Yes, Dedlin, tell us about the wolferines, Jameson said, as if being entertained. How did you get away from them? Well, not as easily as you might think, the wizard said theatrically. Once the cattle wolves of Galoth have your scent, or even worse, have you in their sights, there is usually no chance of escape, and yet I managed to do just that. The black devils were closing in on me fast, and I was too weak to go on. Binder and Dreher had gone on ahead, which was exactly as I had planned. The gangly wolferines slowed when they found me, giving my good friends a better opportunity to escape. I, however, was forced to stand and do battle. There was enough dry tinder around to suit my conjuring needs, so, uttering a carefully chosen word, I encircled myself within a ring of protective blue fire. This startled the wolferines momentarily, for they do not love fire of any color, especially the color of the daytime sky, giving me just enough time to mount the lower branches of a sturdy sugar maple tree. The uphill exercise of escaping had so exhausted me that I feared that I might faint and fall from my perch right into their snapping, drooling jaws. I was able, however, to taunt them from there, angering them to allow Dreher and Commander Binder a few precious seconds more. One unusually large wolferine jumped the fiery blue ring and came at me. I called to the beast in the ancient elder tongue that it feared before it could seize my leg, and it went temporarily mad, rolling in the sticky blue flames, and it quickly returned back the way it came, madly attacking his own brethren. Thus, I was able to climb one step higher. Another wolferine broke through and lunged at me, seized my cape, ripping it from around my neck, nearly yanking me from the tree. My favorite cape was mauled. I tried to set him ablaze, but my aim was off, and I missed. Another tree lit up instead with flames of gold. I was too weary to perform any more magic, so all I could do was climb higher with the last of my quickly waning strength. Somehow I had clung to my cane. High enough now for a brief respite, all but 2 muscled wolferines gave up on me and passed on by up the trail after our good Dreher Freygood and Commander Binder. A pack of nearly 50 of those foul dread beasts, if my count was right. I clung to the tree trunk like an infant to his mother and recited my blessings. The 2 wolferines circled hungrily below me, snarling and gnashing their teeth, their red eyes glowing as hellish fiery coals. It was literally a nightmare come to life. I continued to slowly climb whenever I could, hoping to somehow signal Stardair from the top of the tree for a rescue. Although the thin limbs swayed dangerously with my weight, I was able to get my head up above the treetops and take a good look around. I could not locate Stardeer, but I did see many other disturbing things. The awful Gharnians. 2 Gharnian warships, the aforementioned Mount of Steel and the Godstrike 5, were methodically destroying each one of the Gogmore ships as they rose from the forest with missile blasts as easily as knocking down flies with a swift and exploding swatter. The warships were hovering low, riding the tops of the trees to avoid being spotted by the towers of either Tungulin or Bondoon. One of them, the Godstruck 5, came right for me. I thought it would knock me from my perch if I didn't descend immediately, but I took my chances and waited there, hoping to learn something new or perhaps do some kind of damage before my inevitable demise. Fortunately, I was able to seize a horizontal flange fin as the huge craft slow to turn past me. It was as easy as stepping off onto a moving conveyor. I held on tight because the ship raked through the treetops, shearing off limbs and sharp needles like a scythe. I had no way of getting inside the ship from there, or off of it. I had to just hold on to a bollard for dear life, knuckles red with blood, and I just ride it out for as long as I could, all the while praying for a miracle. I was dragged up against the trees many times, and many times I nearly fell to a harrowing death. My greatest fear was that the warship would just take off into the heavens at speed, and if unable to maintain my precarious hold, I would have then fallen from on high and plummet to the earth like an unlit comet. Miraculously, that did not happen. The Godstrike 5 that I was hanging onto continued its elimination of all the Gogmore crafts until none were left. At which point, the 2 warships then headed back toward Bondoon to reassess their situation, I assumed, and to hide better from Tungulin eyes, with help from the New Year's Day celebratory fireworks going off at our castle city, and to meet up with and quickly lie to Overlord Gharnian, blaming Tungulin for destroying his stalwart Gogmore soldiers to further incite entropy and territorial chaos. The churlish quislings, Dreher barked. Militant brigands, Binder chimed in. As soon as we began our descent into Gharnian's crumbling courtyard in the heart of Bondoon, I was spotted clinging to that fin by the Gogmore soldiers in their crumbled watchtowers. They surrounded me in great numbers as we landed, and apprehended me without a fight, casting me to the ground without mercy. Decided to take me before the great warlock Gharnian as a spy, suggesting to skin me alive, slowly dying at his feet. Then the Gharnians came forward to claim me, and I was taken into their custody instead. There I was flagellated in the courtyard, lashed for information to explain how I got on the flange of the ship and from where. I feigned deaf mute, so they gave up quickly and moved on to more pressing matters. The Gharnian general in charge, Shandark was his name, had his soldiers take me inside the same ship I had rowed in on for further interrogation. He told me that he had some very particular tools and techniques that would make me tell him everything he wanted to know. And I believed him. I was convincingly terrified and naive, quaking and cowering before the lot of them like some homeless hermit from the hills and caves of the forest, although I had already been scheming up a delicious plot of my own. I had never before seen the inside of a Gharnian warship, and I hope that I never will again. They aren't what I imagined them to be at all. They're very clean, pristinely so, and dark. The Gharnians favor black and red in color, but much inside was polished silver. Everything was organized and precise. The controls, the decor, the soldiers' quarters, the layout and design of the pathways and catwalks, and even the prison itself. This proved to be their detriment and their ultimate downfall, for the layout of the ship was so predictable that I felt as though I knew my way around almost immediately. Well, to my dismay, they stripped me nude, took the charts and maps I had recovered from the Tigre without even looking at them, and then they snapped my cane in two to cripple an old beggar even further. I do not believe that they knew I was a wizard because they took very few precautions. I was thrown headlong into a holding cell with an old skeletal cellmate and left alone. So I began planning my escape immediately. Thankfully, I had removed the power crystal from the head of my cane beforehand and had hidden it by sleight of hand while they searched me. That crystal was just enough to soften the tumblers in the lock of my cell so that I could force the heavy door open soon after all had departed. I found a way out, and I took it. Splendid, Dre replied, pleased with the wizard's tale thus far. He sounded quite proud of his old friend. I moved fast, not knowing how much time I had before they discovered my escape. I wasn't sure from moment to moment what was going to happen next. I climbed, crawled, and jumped. I slithered where I could, and still naked, ran across a brightly lit tarmac undiscovered. Eventually, I found where the engineers kept their uniforms, although the one that I chose, the smallest that there was still too large for me. I used a shielded helmet to camouflage my hair and beard, still barefoot. I then moved throughout the ship for a while, disguised as one of them, hiding from soldiers when I needed to, investigating the components, and always searching for an exit door or an escape route. There was enough ammunition on board to blow the warship sky high, so I wired a makeshift detonator and hid it near the turbines where it wouldn't be found. I set a small box of explosives near the expander motor and their massive electrical batteries. As soon as the turbines went, I knew that a chain of reactions would ensue and the whole ship would soon follow thereafter. Well, I then rigged a second detonator and hid it in the bottom of a satchel I had stolen to somehow transport to the other warship as well. Using my best Gharnian jargon, I used the ship's comm in an empty office to call the other warships to have someone from over there come where I was and pick something important up. I then told them that we had obtained some highly classified paperwork from the wrecked Tigre that had been found on a deceased Gogmore, and that General Shandark, remember this name, had suggested that they have a look at it as well before we departed. All right, well, this intrigued them enough, and they were easily fooled. They said that they would send a troop of Gogmore minions over to escort me and my satchel from that ship back over to the other, and so then rendezvous in the loading foyer within 10 or so minutes. This barely gave me enough time to find the exit ramp before my anxious escorts had arrived. All right, well, the Gogmore liegemen were suspicious of me right from the outset when they arrived, sniffing at me with their keen porcine noses. After all, I was the smallest Gharnian they had ever seen, My clothes were comically oversized, and I wore no shoes. I handed the sealed satchel with the detonator to the foremost Gogmore and ordered them to follow me. "Keep an eye out," I barked at them in their own tongue, using a Gharnian accent as best I could. That's some mean feat when you're as nervous as I was. "Hurry on now, no dawdling. Keep up. There's a good lad," and such. I barked at them. Worked well enough. They had been ordered to be obedient. We were marching down the ramp and across a bustling courtyard beneath the very noses of the preoccupied Gharnians, just as the alarms went off everywhere behind us. My escape had been discovered, as had the discovery of 5 or 6 guards that I had left lying unconscious or worse upon the prison ward floors. The wizard paused for a moment, extending his empty flask toward Dreher to have it refilled. "Another kind, sir. This oration has my tongue as parched as dry parchment paper. If I may ask, how is it that you were able to use the Gharnian comm to signal the other ship?" Binder wanted to know. "Surely the comms were coded, old friend, and the military dialogue is never known to any other than the Gharnians." Dreher chuckled. He knew how the wizard had done it. "Excellent question, young commander," Dedlin said. "I took a great risk jeopardizing my own safety to attempt this, but I felt as though I had nothing to lose. Fortunately, in my recent studies back home, I had been analyzing a stolen Doxus manuscript containing Gharnian field tactics and communications, although it was still very antiquated. So, too much, as much as I could. Well, to learn as much as I could about their field codes and comm dialogue, in case we ever intercepted random transmissions at our stations in Tungulin. I memorized the very basics. How to use the equipment, how to signal, transmit, and receive messages, how to mimic an officer, just enough to get by. I had no idea that I would ever put that knowledge to such good practical use, and so soon. "Amazing," Jameson replied. "Dedlin is amazing." "The wizard's luck is the most amazing," Binder was inclined to agree. "Please continue on, good sir." So he did. "The smell of rank human," the lead Gogmore said to me as we hurried across the loading dock toward the other ship. There was utter chaos everywhere, what with the news of the destruction of so many of their fighter crafts in the forest. "You are the smallest Gharnian I have ever seen," he said in his guttural tongue. "Why do you wear a blaster helmet to cover your face when there is no blaster fire here in the city?" His suspicions were getting the better of him, and I feared that I would not be able to get much further before they discovered me. I was already so exhausted. "Too many questions," I snapped at him. "Mind your duties. I have much to discuss with very important people," and so on and so forth. Once on board the Mount of Steel, I took the detonator satchel back from them, and I left the confused Gogmore soldiers behind at the service door area to venture on alone inside with my guerrilla shenanigans. I do believe that it was at that moment that I was the closest to being caught. When I left that boorish Gogmore brute standing there with his finger in his ear, he knew that I was no Gharnian soldier. Behind me, the real Gharnians began boarding both ships in waves to prepare for departure from Bandun. Their business there was concluded. I slid into the shadows and I crept down a ventilation shaft to find the engine room of that great ship before it was too late. After sabotaging the Mount of Steel in the same way that I had sabotaged the God Strike 5, I tried to go quickly back out the same way I'd come in, but I could not. The only way out of there was past an inspection station that had filled with a garrison of rowdy Gharnian soldiers coming back on board, alert and snappy, and they would not be as easily fooled as the dim-witted Gogmores had been. I was then trapped inside, and I knew that I did not have much time before the explosions began. I had no choice then but to hide and wait, and to look for some other opportunity to escape, or maybe not. I soon found a service stairwell leading to the lowest decks and crept down into the belly of the warship to explore and hide and wait. At this time, Dedlin stopped his oration again momentarily to savor a drink of ale and a puff of his pipe. "Talking makes me thirsty," he reiterated. "Another refill, if you would, my dear friend." Ken gladly served his needs like a good barkeep would. The suns had gone down behind a deep, smoky gray cloud, covering them in the summer shadow. To the northeast, great monolithic stones stood starkly on the horizon like crooked spires and towers, smoldered in deadly lichens. The sun's light upon them glowed a brazen summer gold. The crew members had been enraptured by Dedlin's every word and were waiting anxiously for him to continue on with his fascinating story. He was about to do just that, but something out on the horizon beyond the next chunk of hills momentarily caught his attention. He squinted, then continued on. So then I waited there. He rose to his feet, squinting harder. "Hold on one moment, if you please," he said, eyes widening. He rose to his toes, peering out at the horizon. "What is that puff? Is that what I think it is?" To the south of them, there were tiny wisps of white clouds rising from the trees on one hillside. Not a misty, wet cloud like dew or fog, but a dry, fluffy cloud comprised of millions of fuzzy white specks aloft from an aloof wind. "It is. My story can wait a moment, for we have a rare opportunity here, I believe." "Well, what is it?" Lake asked nervously. "Drop the fish nets," Dreher excitedly suggested. "We'll pull some on board and have us a treat, while Dedlin finishes his fine oration." "Well, what is it?" Ken repeated. "Candy trees," Dreher answered. "Must be a scattered grove down in these woods," Gabriel answered. "I see a few clouds floating up in the wind for miles in every direction." Dreher Freygood was as elated as Dedlin Dane was. "The seed pods open and release the seed flux every year around this time," he explained to those who had never seen or heard of them before. "They float skyward in the wind like giant dandelion fluffs and travel miles before falling to plant and sprig anew. Very tasty, too." "Head right for it, Percy, my friend," the wizard said. "What an unexpected treat." "My pleasure," the Mahekian said, pulling the guide stick slightly to the right. "The fuzz is tart, tangy, and sweet. It melts right on your tongue like sweet berries and citrus candy," Dreher told him, "and at the heart of it there's a tasty little brown nut." Dreher quickly joined Percy at the helm. "Here's what I was looking for," he replied, pressing a button. Just before Stardeer plunged through the fluffy cloud, two oval-shaped fish nets protruded from the hull beneath Stardeer. For a few seconds, the crew was enveloped by the soft swarm, but in a flash, they emerged from the seed cloud again, the fish nets filled with hundreds of fist-sized candy tree cotton balls, retracted quickly back into the holding tanks of the hull automatically. "Woohoo!" they called. Dedlin laughed long and hard. It was a merry sound. "I'll go get our treats," Dre Freygood piped, dashing eagerly down into the hold. "Go ahead, Dedlin Dane. Don't wait for me." "Very well, Sir Freygood," the wizard replied. "But you're not tricking anyone. We know you want the best candy for yourself. Just don't eat too much of it or you'll get stomach sick." "Another round of ales," Lake Tobias said, bringing up a jug to pour more for everyone. "Wood pear flavored." Where was I? "Oh, yes, in the belly of the beast," Dedlin said, enthusiastically continuing on. It took him a few moments to regain his thoughts. "I waited long in the lowest level of the ship, down where the Gharnians store their food supplies," he told them. "It was dark and cold. My body was aching from all I'd been through, and I had suffered some minor injuries that night, so I needed a spot of rest before going on anyway. However, at my ripening old age, sleep can sometimes be a powerful aphrodisiac as well. Before I knew it, I was hard asleep. When I awoke, the ship was moving. I could feel it, vibrating me in my bones. My heart leaped because I knew it was going to blow, and I wasn't sure how long I had been asleep there. There were no windows at that level, so I had no idea at what height and where we had flown off to and for how long I had been napping. I only knew that I had to get off that ship immediately before I perished there. Just then, the door opened, and an old, pudgy, glocky cook came down the stairs into the galley. He hit a switch, and the lights came on. I was instantly discovered. He asked me who I was and what I was doing, and so I told him truthfully, and I told him all that I had done. I had a blaster pointed at him, so he was a very attentive listener. I told him that if he didn't help me get off the ship right away, that we were both going to die there. He made me promise that if he showed me a way out, I would take him with me, and so I agreed to save the poor sod. He was barely more than a slave anyway, and claimed that he would be forever grateful to me if I could free him from the Gharnians' brutal control. How could I resist such a request? The world needs more great chefs. Well, he offered me a pair of his sandals to help protect the soles of my old feet, and I gratefully accepted. Just like the leathery soles of my feet, they were as worn as old wagon wheels. Well, simply enough, there was a garbage chute in the next room, and it opened by the pull of a lever. We found, by peering through, that the ship was standing nearly still, hovering above the forest, and that it was now daylight outside. I wondered why the bombs had not yet gone off and prayed that they had not somehow been discovered. The trees below us were very close, but still too far to jump to. We tried hard to come up with some kind of plan, but there were no sleds, no ropes, no anchor chains, and no cables. Just then, it all began to happen. An explosion went off that knocked us to the floor. I could hear the gases blowing from the turbines. It was so loud that I thought my ears would burst. Then there were more explosions from above, and the warship turned up onto its side. Everything began sliding across the floor. The cook and I were nearly buried alive by overturned trays of frozen meats and fish. Then I heard the other ship explode, and I knew then at once that the detonators had done their jobs. I think I yelped with the joy of sabotage success. Those great warships were virtually indestructible by an outside attack, but thankfully, I had discovered that they were certainly susceptible to sabotage from within. All right, well, the cook and I crawled back to the garbage chute, watching the trees drawing closer as the ship fell, spinning toward them. Our only hope was to jump at precisely the right moment to catch the branches and hold on with all our might. If we waited too long, we knew that the great ship would fall right on top of us and crush us like a machine press. We took our chances and leaped, tumbling down and out of the chute, reaching for the nearest Tigre tree. Both of us hit a tree and desperately seized the sharp branches. Our combined weight pulled the treetop over so much that we heard wood splitting. The warship came spinning down toward us, pressing against the tops of the trees. The very same dorsal fin that I had clung to on the other ship the night before hit me on the head as it passed. I was dazed, but somehow I hung on. The mount of steel veered off and crashed 100 yards away in a swirling dervish of gases and flame, and beyond that, the Godstrike 5 suffered a similar fate. The pair of ships were destroyed. I had been a successful saboteur. There came a rising applause and vocal cheers from the happy and amazed crew. After a time, the cook and I managed to climb down, top to bottom, and we headed back to Tungulin with the aid of an overgrown hog and a saddle. But that story is long and embarrassing and has no real bearing on the outcome of this particular tale, so I need not waste time and digress. When I reached the king's chambers that afternoon, your Sunshaft Aureolus had already left. You were gone, and I was glad. Things were certainly not safe for King Jameson Day in Tungulin anymore. Traitors, spies, and Gharnian sympathizers were being rousted by the dozens. Word had spread kingdom-wide that the heir of day was taking shelter there in our castle city. I told Van Tu my abbreviated story, and he told me his. He had seen the warships go down and had told me of his encounter with the traitor Saber-Johnhausen. I was disheartened from his words and weary from the night's tiresome exploits. I longed to leave immediately while your trail was still warm, but Van Tu ordered me to rest while he made preparations for my departure. So, with bottle in hand, I retired to my quarters beneath the music chambers and slept the night through, safe, solemn, and secure. That is my tale. Most of it. My, what adventures you had, Gabriel said. I'll have a flagon of ale myself to cheer this wizard among wizards. As will I, consented Drer Freygood, if the lard is not yet empty, and some more crunchy candy fluffs. I'll have some of that, Jameson said, seizing a handful of white puffball from Drer's bowl. Let me pour, Commander Binder said in a rare festive mood. I insist. If nothing else, wizard, you can still tell a marvelous story. And yet it does not end there, Dedlin told them. The most ironic parts are still yet to come. You may still be more shocked and overcome than you are now. Should I wait before going on? Finish everything up tomorrow? What about the charts and maps you recovered from the Tigre? Jameson wanted to know. What news of Meade? Were there messages for me? That I want and may need to know. Unable to take a decent break, he desired, Dedlin returned to his professor-like state of mind to tutelage the crew further on. There were none, he answered. I read what I could while I had them and learned much about the pilot of the doomed Tigre craft while doing so, but alas, the Gharnians took me from all the singed scraps that I had, save this crystal, which I have now remounted on a new and improved walking stick. Dedlin answered, displaying his fine new instrument of magic. However, that loss pales in comparison to what has been gained. The next tidbit of wonderful news that I will present to you now, if you all are ready. You see, one substantial thing of value was saved from the wreck of Tigre. Not notes and maps, the pilot himself. The pilot? Who flew that median craft? An inquisitive Jameson Day needed to know. Were they truly from Mead? Dedlin smiled. Indeed, he proclaimed. He not only survived the crash, but he made his way all the way to the citadels of Tigre and spoke with King Ventu in great lengths the very night before your departure. He was there with you the entire time. In fact, the two of them became very close, and King Ventu insisted that the pilot of the Tigre should join this very expeditionary party, which he did gladly. What? Binder squawked. Introduce yourself, kind sir. I am he, Pythagoras admitted. It was I. The Tigre was my craft. It was I who was shot down by warships in the forest. What? Binder then piped, nearly spilling his drink. It made sense in so many ways. The entire crew was in gasps of awe. Jameson stood silent and wide-eyed. A fellow Median, he was thinking. The Thordian came a step forward to give his part of the night's tale. If I may expound, he requested. Please do, the wizard responded, needing a brief respite so that he wouldn't get too hoarse. Very well, he said. I will explain all. It was a harrowing flight from the onset, with tales I won't elaborate on in detail. However, once I arrived on the mainland, the Gharnian sentries were at once on my trail. Somehow they knew about me. They tracked me for a week, but gave full chase as I neared Tigre, questioning over the comm if the stone bearer was on board. The Mount of Steel and the Godstrike 5 appeared behind me as I crossed the last few miles of Galgaria and reached the Great Galoth. Once they surmised my destination, they signaled me to stop and tried to force me to the ground. When I did not, they opened fire on me. I survived the crash mostly unscathed and went forward from there on foot to Tigre at full haste to make my case to the king. I had been deprived of sleep for many days, and I was hungry and weary. I had flown solo from the great fortresses of Isle Mead, not with a message for King Day, as you all had once expected, but with ominous information for King Ventu. The maps and charts I had left behind and that Dedlin had found served little more than utilitarian purposes to guide me there. Of far more importance, I had lists of spies who had infiltrated the great cities. Mead, Tigre, the City of Gold, Poed, Sissel, and Dindian, amongst others. I was attempting to reach Tigre before King Day did, to give Commander Binder lists of spies and assassins that I had long since memorized before my overseas departure, to make it a safer place. That is how we were able to thwart the assassination attempt on King Ventu's life. I had arrived with that information of traitors only just in time. Saber Johnhausen, the commander bristled. Ventu was so grateful, the wizard added. Forgive me for my clandestine demeanor and manner and standoffishness, fellow travelers, but I hope you now understand. I could not let that information fall into the wrong hands. I have long been a stalwart patriot in the service of the family of Day, my entire life in Mead, and could not accept failure by any carelessness. A fellow Median, Jameson said, delighted, realizing that Sir Tigris must know the truth that he was not a king, no boy at all, that she was, in truth, a girl. We have much to discuss. Yes, your highness, Ott said, winking. He knew that she now knew that he knew her secret there. I have served as one of your secret guards in Mead since I was a cub. My order works in secrecy, as you know, and I am adept in keeping my own secrets as well. Your highness thought that he might have recognized me before, and perhaps he had, for I, with my brethren, have been close by your side in one way or another for many events for many years, holding that oath and position by vow of honor and the pledges of devout devotion, until I could be certain that every person on this craft could be trusted. I thought it best to shield my identity. You're adept at keeping secrets well, Jameson said gratefully. You knew of John Housen's infiltration, Binder piped, even angrier the more he thought about the treachery. I encouraged King Bantu to order our departure from Tigre immediately. With a list of spies in hand, Bantu's own safety was at great further risk, and he had many things to concentrate on and to contend with. His plate was full with the assassination attempt, the Gogmore invasion, John Housen's deceit, and until Dedlin Dane perchance returned, there was nothing else he could do for you there. Gabriel and Jameson shared a glance. What a remarkable revelation. Tigris was a median. Dreher looked at Dedlin. Ott was shot down because the Gharnian suspected that the stone-bearer himself might have been on the Tigre skycraft from Mead, he said softly, somewhat overwhelmed. Perhaps even the stone was on board? They wanted it and would not allow it to reach Tungulin, so that was what the Gogmores were searching for at the crash site that night. Lake Tobias brought around another helping of candy tree fluff to any who might still want to indulge. Dedlin continued on with his part of the story. So those secrets are finally revealed, he said in relief. If I may, my turn again, he started, throat now rested enough to carry on further. A few more crucial matters while we're all still gathered together. Please, sir, the Thordian submitted, easing back toward the wall, his story told and identity revealed. Where was I? He mumbled. Aha! Back to where I was on our mission. All right, bear with me, compatriots. After I awoke the next morning, after a good night's sleep in my own bed, I was so relieved to hear about Sir Ott's involvement in our story and his presence on this quest. I learned that Dreher and Frey and Binder, yeah, right there, had also joined in, and that Percy, the king's very own master pilot, was along as well, manning the helm. Eased me so much that I went back to my room and slept the rest of the day and night through to fully recover. Well, the Gogmores were ordered to attack the towns outside the city on several fronts, moving inward, but Wheat had matters well in hand. I just needed to reload, recover, and to think things through again before shooting off in hot pursuit. First of all, there were some things to do there in Tugulin before I left. I found the freed Glocky cook a job, for one thing, and I hope he enjoys his newfound citizenship. He made me a wonderful grilled fish dinner and chocolate souffle before I left. Also, there was much ado surrounding the news of the death of the assassin Tersda the Brute. There appeared to have been several rewards for his insidious hide from all around the kingdom, so I let the authorities know that Prince Gabriel Din Diane had insisted that his share of the reward money go to the farmer Farron Din and his good family. Why not? Gabriel replied with a smile. He pulled me up from avoiding a long fall, as have I, from the head of a waterfall. the wizard replied, and then continued on. King Vantu had received startling information that a Gharnian air fleet was crossing Galgaria, right in your flight path aboard the Sunshaft Aurealis. He bid me haste my own departure to intercept you before you cross paths with them. I persuaded Captains Lake and Clan to join me, referred to as Knights of Galgaria now, and I left hours before dawn the next day. I searched far and wide, questioning townsfolk and travelers I passed in every local brothel and fiefdom if they had seen you. When I found Percy's Sunshaft wrapped in creeper tendrils, I feared the worst, but hoped for the best. I knew you'd have to follow the old East Road on foot, so I came hard and fast after you. I found one of your camps, and the coals beneath the earth were still warm. There were rumors of Gharnian scout ships in the area, so I was fearful. By the time I reached Arrowgreen, you were toying with the wood elves. I tried to make my presence known then, except that I spotted the Gharnian soldiers disembarking from their ship in numbers. I couldn't risk exposing myself to them just yet. I saw you, Jameson added. I tried to stop. It was good you dove down into the Arrowgreen right then and there. The Gharnians were heavily armed and coming to capture you, to take you hostage for interrogation before you could disappear down into that valley. They wouldn't follow. Now, Arrowgreen is a true marvel of the world, Dedlin then said, but I wasn't sure what effect it would have on you all. I used to play in the moths as a boy, mostly on the outskirts, and later, as a young wizard's apprentice, I would cross Arrowgreen with other novice wizards just to entertain myself. I'm nearly immune to their influence now, and I know a spell or two to make them disperse temporarily, although smoke works wonders too. They loathe it. Therefore, I am very much at ease in Arrowgreen and other similar locations. I hid Stardeer on the opposite side and found my way back down into the swarm on foot, praying that I was not too late. I ran down a different path than the road you used to cross the valley, a shortcut that I knew would get me further downstream ahead of you if anyone fell in. I knew that with the storms of the last few days, Arrowgreen's waters would be flood swollen, and that you would never make it across without some kind of trouble. When I reached the last bridge, I heard splashing coming my way. I went to the bank just in time to pull Commander Binder and Sir Othagris to safety on the side. A moment later, King Day and Prince Gabriel came floating by, and they too were rescued there. There's a bridge or the Arrowgreen River run? Dreher asked. Well, there are 4. As I said, I found our doomed swimmers as they passed the last one, right at the head of the Falls of the Sky. Dedlin said, just inches before they went over the side and off into sheer nothingness. Shivers rode up Gabriel's spine. He quivered. As soon as I was sure that no one else was floating past, I located Dreher and Percy, both befuddled on shore, wandering foolishly about. I believe you know the rest of the story. They each took turns thanking the wizard again and drinking to his health and prosperity. Dedlin drank one more flask himself, looking at the suns while sailing high in the cobalt sky. Well, the morning has turned into afternoon, and this drink is going to my head. I'm ready for a spot of lunch if no one else is, he said. Then we'll move on from relegating what has happened in the past and on to what we'll be facing in the future. Get down to the important matters closer at hand. Ease up on your daytime drinking before stupidity overtakes you. Binder commented that his ears needed a rest too before they could hear any more. With Lake and Clan's assistance. Within an hour, Dedlin or Dreher Freygood brought out trays laden with cheese, bread and butter, leftover ham and eggs from that morning's breakfast, fried mushrooms, and 2 fat girl hens that had been marinating in a tart lemon garlic sauce overnight, served with wild rice and onions. There was no time for baking potatoes, but there were fresh fruits for whoever wanted them: apples, strawberries, brown berries, and miniature coreless pears. What was left over of the candy tree seeds make a wonderful dessert. Everyone was full, even Tigris, whose belly, it seemed, had no bottom to it sometimes when there was fatty meat to engulf. The great monolithic stones had passed into the distance, and now there were rolling fields and gently sloping hills on all sides of them. An occasional singular tree appeared now and again with wide, outspread branches, usually one every 2 or 3 miles or so, resembling giant, lonely umbrellas. It was a lonely land, but wholesome and welcoming nonetheless. They ate and drank together, marveling at the highlights of both Dedlin's and Ott's remarkable stories over and over again. They were asked to repeat parts of it or explain things further in more detail, which the wizard and the Thordian were both more than willing to oblige in brevity. Dedlin was apparently delighted at his own exploits too, praising his own luck often. "Wizards don't brag," Dedlin said to Binder after a typical snide remark. As the afternoon continued on, Ott found his place as a guest of honor among the crew there that evening, and experienced more backslapping than he cared for. He was a humble servant and seemed a bit uncomfortable with the newfound respect, praise, attention, and admiration he was being shown. With the plates were empty and the flask not more than half full, Dedlin placed his eyeglasses back on the hook of his elongated nose, appearing cross-eyed as he lit up his pipe once more. "And now, down to it, my good friends," he began in a more serious note. "Let us finish up the business at hand, about what only a few here so far know, most of which is still only in bits and pieces. I'll now share everything of what I myself know in fullness, as best as I am able, along with a warning of oncoming and inevitable dangers that we must now face," he said sternly. "The way ahead will not be easy and is fraught with perils unknown, greater than any you have ever experienced thus far, I assure you." Seems rather gloomy," Binder put in. "Go on." "Well, I must," Dedlin said, standing to stretch his legs and allow his old knees to pop. "Gentlemen, listen. These are the 2 subjects we'll cover. I'll give our enemy a name shortly, which I'm sure will be hard for some of you to even believe, and I'll be revealing exactly what it is that our young King Jameson Day seeks on this mission that we are accompanying him on. Something to help us face that enemy. Something powerful. You'll fully understand why he has sought out our help and asked for our assistance. After you've heard it all, whether you believe any of it or not, you may then choose whether to remain along for the bumpy ride or be off on your own way at our next stopping. No greater task has ever been asked of good men than is what is about to be asked of you right here, right now, today. Should you decide to stand down and depart our fellowship, no ill thoughts will befall you. Do we all understand?" All nodded to him, acknowledging his seriousness. "This is it, then," he said, clearing his throat and taking a deep breath in preparation to explain. "In essence, gentlemen, we are in with no simpler word for it by definition, a race, the wizard told them. A race that affects the fate of all who live on the Kingdom continent. Commander Binder already had a confused expression on his face. A race? Against? Dedlin went on. Presently, we are ahead of the enemy at this early stage, but not by much. You've already seen some of our competitors looming close behind us. Ahead of us, we will soon pass from Galgaria into the plains of Tus, and from there on further to your own homeland, Commander Binder, the lands of Gorn. Racing against who, wizard? He still wanted to know. The Gharnians, perchance? I'll be there momentarily, Benjen, before bringing out my weaponry and don my battle attire. No questioning yet, if you please. This information is linear. First off, the basic foundations, he explained. Okay. Somewhere in a desolate region of Gorn, our destiny awaits us. That I know. That is our final destination, if we can make it. I say somewhere in Gorn because currently the exact finish line of this race in its final details is still a bit unknown. It is a very secretive, sacred place. A cave, either made naturally or by man. A cave in a mystical wood surrounded by old magic and cribs of forever blooming jasmine night flowers. But its precise location is known to no living being now, including myself. Well, unless the great sorcerer Ozai Abix, who I've not seen nor heard from in years, still knows. I have found no maps or books that describe the location of the sacred cave, if any ever existed, because there are none and never have been. Therefore, I've only a vague idea, and that is the best we can hope for and expect. But once we get close enough, things will begin running by themselves, if my theories and calculations are correct. With a somewhat magical magnet-like attraction, you'll all soon witness and experience. In the meantime, our adversaries in this race pursue us in increasing numbers to overtake the prize that awaits at the finish line before we do. To steal it. To destroy it. Yes. Like the Gharnians. Benjen. It is the Gharnians, Benjen, and other assassins, he said, looking at Commander Binder. And some other demonic creatures more foul than I now wish to tell you. You'll know soon enough. The mood of the crew darkened at the wizard's frightening descriptions. The threat on them widened like a dark and engulfing cloud of despair. Bring them on, Binder then said. Prepare yourselves, they will stop at nothing. Nor will we, Ott said. They might not shoot us down because they too do not know where to search. They will follow us, yes, or apprehend us if they must, to capture and enslave us in captive chains to force us to lead them there. Torture might even be within their recourses. Gabriel was increasingly angered and also relatively fascinated. Some of his beliefs and non-beliefs in the old story had begun to change recently. The Chronicles of the Old World, it was more officially known by scholars in his schooling days. Many mysteries that had been folded up and put away in storage bins for centuries were now being unfolded and revealed to him before his very eyes. Things he had never believed were true before are. He glanced at the boy and noticed that he was strangely at ease with the exposure of warnings and the revealings of secrets, most of which he had known all along and had been keeping it all subjectively to himself. Admirably, the boy king appeared grim and fearless, while listening to the wizard's hard words. Why do they do this, you might wonder? The Gharnians, why are they hunting us? By choice? The wizard asked them. Why are they also after this treasure so intensely? This is the part I don't wish to explain and tell, but I must. Know thine enemy. Know thine enemy, both Binder and Ott repeated in unison. Then a few others did the same. Famous quote from an ancient military scroll. It's because they're being commanded to do so, he told them. His audience had faces of confused expressions, and so he went on in further detail. By the enemy we must now speak of, a god, a deity of old who has returned to conquer and control. An ancient being, dark and powerful, whose powers are returning to him after eons of neglect and complacency. It is he who now drives our obedient adversaries like a cruel whip. I know of whom you're referring to, Dreher Freygood snarled. Dedlin nodded at his close friend. As do I, Gabriel added. As do I, Jameson also said, now bowing his head but keeping his eyes forward. Who is this we're up against? Binder growled, wanting to know so badly that he was losing his patience for a lingering answer. Dedlin obliged. If you have never heard or don't recall the name of Gilgahar before, then hear it now, he hesitantly told him and the rest. He is Lord Gilgahar. The crew's eyes widened, sensing his weaknesses from afar, from just hearing the sound of his name. Some trembled and quivered when hearing that one spoken word that offered a dark force beneath it. The mythological demon devil god of old, Dedlin said to them, known as the Black Tyrant of Gharn, the ancient Dark One, the Lord Master Gilgahar the Great, King of Death and Demons. He has returned to the fortresses of Gharn and is the might, the inspiration, and is the force behind the ambitious and obedient Gharnian army and many other dark, foul creatures now emerging from dark places, traveling abroad. We are reliving the tales of old, my friends. We are swept up in them now, here, together with one another on this shared venture of grave significance. Dreher was then inclined to say to them, and so chimed in, whether you believe the tales of old or not is unimportant, because obviously the Gharnians do. Otherwise, they would not be putting all of their efforts into keeping our one small boy from reaching the destination of his ancestors before they do. He grimaced. That explains it all. He wants what we want from that sacred cave, Dedlin went on to reveal and lighten the gloom that had surrounding them with more enlightening insights. A magical stone of power, he piped gleefully. The stone of the first King Day of Mead. The sun seemed to break from the clouds in the influence of those good words, lightening up the blanketed atmosphere and enhancing more positive dispositions right there on the deck of the ship. Lake and Cran were perplexed and lost, still remaining as attentive and studious as they could. The wizard spun toward the prince. Gabriel, the great key, if you will. Gabriel reached into his shirt and revealed the stone key which he had been bestowed to hold, extending it upward on his chain for all to see. Many of you have heard of the legendary stones of power, if you might remember. The ancient stories tell of how the original lord of this kingdom continent, the first Day of Mead, released one or more of his great powers into the safekeeping of these mystical stones and hid them throughout this vast kingdom when he first decided to choose human mortality. This key Gabriel is holding before you, and a few sacred words that I have yet to reveal unlocks one of these stones, about the size of an apricot or an apple, I'm led to understand, from its hold within this extraordinary Gharnian cave hold. There are some, on both sides of this conflict, who believe that by rejoining King Jameson to this stone, that one or more of the five great powers of the universe, creation, love, life, time, or destruction, will become his to command. Remember, Gilgahar fears no army, but he does fear that the heir of day reaches the stone first. He will acquire a power equal to or greater than his own. To survive and dominate the world, he cannot allow this to happen, because the stone bearer could very well again decree the same fate that sent him off into exile in the beginning of our age. He will try to stop us all by all means. Will follow us to this cave to destroy the stone, or try to take it for his own. He will then eliminate the young king and all who aided him. Once complete, the rise of his dominion will go henceforth unchecked. There was a moment of contemplative silence, nearly too much for most to rationally understand and comprehend. Questions? The crew was befuddled, not even sure where to begin. I have one, Drer said. What do we do after we reach this cave and acquire this stone? What then? The next step. Only the future knows, Dedlin answered, then decided to go on just a little bit further before moving off for some private meditation by himself. He was tired. For one other thing, in speculation, I personally believe that there are 4 more stones besides this one, Drer Freygood, one for each of the 5 great powers that I have told you about. When we obtain the first one, we will reassess our mission then. I am hoping an answer will present itself, for better or worse, as it often does. Right now, all we have is a race to win and a prize to seize. And that's enough for the time being. Jameson then spoke up. I do know of this great sorcering magus Ozai Abix that Dedlin speaks of. I know of him well. I was always told that he was the greatest counselor to my father and me before he passed away when I was but 2 years old. Many said his years with my family went further back than anyone alive could guess, nearly to the beginning of the age. He is my mentor and my friend. I'm curious about that and would gladly hear more, Dedlin said, always curious about everything. As would I, Gabriel then replied. I've seen Ozai Abix before in Din Diane, in quiet council with my father. Jameson looked at Othagris, who must have seen the sorcerer many times while in Mead as well. The Thordian seemed to glow with respect and fond memories regarding the great Ozai Abix. My family had enjoyed many generations of peace and prosperity over the kingdom reign, Jameson said. I was told that my father had begun growing concerned about what he sensed was a shifting in kingdom tides, and was often in council with his staff and with the great sorcerer, discussing these intuitions. As a symbolic gift to me, on my 7th birthday, Ozai Abix had entrusted my parents with this key to the stone to hold on to. He had told them that he might someday return to Mead and, if need be, to retrieve it, but for the time being, the key was not safe in his possession while he traveled abroad on the mainland. And if I remember correctly, off he went to northern Eof, to a place called Ben Miner's Orami village, where he lived. After the passing of my parents, his visits to Palace Mead became less and less frequent, and then one day they stopped altogether. He was not heard from since. He does a lot of travel, the wizard said, to gather news, to keep a watchful eye. We received messages about him as he wandered, awaiting his return, with no sightings of him anywhere, and heard of subversive events unfolding across the continent by the reports from our scouts. After more than 2 harrowing years, without his guidance and wisdom, my counselors and I began many meetings concerning the quest for the stone. We could not know if we were acting too late or if I was leaving Meade prematurely. We desperately needed the counsel of Uzziah Abbix the Great, and there was none to be had. Suspected spies began to appear in Meade, and the rumors of assassins were sprouting. Our scouts reported seeing Gharnians leaving their southern gates in multitudes and building walls and fortresses along the seas to the west and the mountains, the rims in the south. Good men were being seduced with false promises and lies and were marching southward to join the armies there, wanting to belong to him. One evening during Midsummer's Eve festival, word reached us that they were making preparations to come across the seas to Meade. They had begun their search for me in earnest and for the family's stones of power. Gil had returned, and he sought vengeance against the family heirs. I can tell you that my father was right. The tides have certainly turned, and we are set on an irrevocable course. There is no more stalling. This is our only chance, and it is terrifying. Gil-Gahar is a primal god and an all-powerful enemy. I am not. I'm just me. I'm moving forward with anyone who will come along, or I will proceed onward by myself. I must retake the stone of my forefathers and all the power and responsibility that it bears if we are to stand up to Gil-Gahar's cruelty and oncoming onslaught. Otherwise, the kingdom continent will fight and toil powerlessly and crumble and die away. Our way of life as we know it will cease to exist. I do believe that what Dedlin says is right about the call of the stone. I have never said this before, never told a living soul, but I believe what he said about things moving on their own course. I can honestly say that I feel the stone drawing closer. I can hear it in the spirit of my soul. With each passing day, its signal becomes stronger. It knows that I am coming for it. It awaits our reunion. It calls to me in my heart for a reunion. And until that reunion, no Gharnian shall ever lay a hand upon you, Tigre said grimly. To that cause, I pledge my life. As have I, Gabriel said. No Gharnian or any other fell man nor beast. I pledge the same, Drear Freygood said. As do I, said Commander Binder, then Percy. Dedlin puffed. Lake, Quan, you are both part of this crew now. What say you? They looked at one another, then back to the wizard. We're in, they said. Then we are one, Dedlin decreed, and we are making history together one way or another. To the Stone of Power, Drear cheered, holding his flagon aloft, and to the Stone Seeker, King Jameson, Day of Meade. They toasted. To the wizard, Gabriel said, may his stories never cease to amaze. May he continue donning his most gayest apparel for as long as possible, Drear encouraged. And to the illustrious crew of Stardeer, with whom the Stone Seeker gladly entrusts his life, Jameson gratefully acknowledges, we shall not fail. I, for one, am enlightened, delighted, and impressed with each of you, Percy said. And now the story is told in full. It is good to know you all, and even better, that no secrets may build any walls between us anymore on this most noble and gallant journey. Jameson looked up to see Dedlin's kind eyes watching him. Was it time to emerge? Tigris, too, who also knew his most hidden remaining secret, and had said nothing of it so far, nodded knowingly at him and winked supportively. Was it the right time to tell everyone the truth? Perhaps it was the right time to reveal his true self. Perhaps the time had come for him to shed his skin at this time of honesty and forthright declarations. No more secrets. The thought of doing that sounded liberating. It was safe enough now. I have one last thing I would like to say, he began, a rosy flush rising from his neck to his cheeks. It was a tough choice to make, but he was confident about making it. Dedlin nodded supportively. For the sake of complete honesty, Jameson began, since everyone is opening up. The crew looked toward him, but it was directly to Gabriel that Jameson intended to direct his message. I am not... Excuse me, Quan suddenly blurted out witlessly, uncomfortable about interrupting, but unable to keep silent any longer. But, there's something out there that I think someone ought to see. Please, hurry. Good job, Sentinel, Pythagoras praised, spotting a figure racing through the trees. There he is again, the rider. That's the end of Chapter 8. Chapter 9, Tuss, begins tomorrow.